I moved to that town when I was 24 years old, fresh out of college and really just trying to figure things out. It was a pretty small place, a few thousand people maybe, not much going on, but it had a decent community college where I landed a job in the admissions office. It was exactly what I needed at the time, a quiet place to sort my head out after 4 chaotic years studying something I no longer cared much about. I worked Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, nothing exciting, just processing applications and answering basic questions. My apartment was one of those old, slightly run-down fourplex units, but it was cheap and close enough to walk to work, which was a huge plus since my beat-up sedan often refused to start in the colder months. Evenings were pretty dull. I'd usually make myself a simple dinner, maybe watch some Netflix, or try to read a book. I wasn't really the going out type, and in a town that size, there wasn't a whole lot to go out to anyway. The one thing I did try to stick with, for my physical and mental health, was going to the gym. There was only one gym in town, a pretty basic place, but it had everything I needed: free weights, a few treadmills, and a couple of those elliptical machines. It was in one of those mini strip malls, right next to a defunct video store and across from a pizza place that always smelled incredible. The gym was open 24 hours, which was nice for people with weird schedules, but I always went at the same time, right after work, around 5:15 or 5:30. It was generally pretty busy then. People getting their workout in, before heading home for dinner. Sometimes I'd see the same faces, nod a quick hello, but mostly I kept to myself, headphones on, just getting through my routine. The gym had this system where everyone got a plastic key fob, a little blue, rectangular thing with the gym's logo printed on it. You'd wave it in front of the scanner by the door, it would beep green, and you were in. It also logged your entry, I guess to track attendance and make sure everyone was a member. I didn't think much about it, just another piece of technology doing its job. My fob lived on my keychain, right next to my car keys and my apartment key. It never left my sight, never really left my pocket when I wasn't using it. This went on for about 6 months. I was settling into my routine, feeling pretty good about things. My car was still temperamental, but I was saving up for a newer one. Work was steady, if not thrilling. Life was just normal, mundane, predictable. And honestly, after the stress of college, that was exactly what I wanted. I'd had enough surprises to last a lifetime, or so I thought. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got a call at my desk at work. It was an unfamiliar number, local prefix. I answered it, expecting it to be a student or a parent with a question about financial aid. Instead, it was Gary, the manager from the gym. Gary was this older guy, probably in his late 50s, always wearing a faded gym t-shirt even when he wasn't working out. He was generally pretty laid back, not the type to get worked up. He said, "Hey, is this Alex?" I said, "Yeah, it is." He paused for a second, then said, "We need to talk about your gym usage." My heart did this weird little flutter. I immediately started running through anything I could have done wrong. Did I forget to wipe down a machine? Was I accidentally using someone else's locker? I couldn't think of anything. I was pretty conscientious about following the rules. I said, "Oh, okay. What's up?" He said, "Can you swing by after work?" "I'd rather talk face to face." I said, "Sure, I'll be there around 5:30. He said, "Great, see you then," and he hung up. The rest of my workday was a blur. My mind kept replaying the conversation. Gym usage. What could that even mean? I knew I didn't go to the gym that much, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. I didn't push weights beyond my limits or hog equipment. I was careful not to make a mess. I was genuinely baffled and a little bit anxious. This was the most excitement I'd had in months, and it was tied to potential trouble. When I got to the gym that evening, Gary was waiting for me at the front desk, looking a little more serious than usual. He motioned for me to follow him into his cramped office, which was mostly filled with overflowing filing cabinets and a desk that looked like it hadn't been dusted in years. He closed the door behind us, which immediately made me even more confused and nervous. This felt like a real scolding was coming. He sat down in his swivel chair, leaned back, and folded his hands over his stomach. He looked at me with this sort of bewildered expression, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He said, "Alex, I need to ask you something kind of strange." He paused again, and I braced myself. He said, "You've been coming to the gym at 3 in the morning every night for the past week, right?" My jaw practically dropped. 3 in the morning, every night. I just stared at him. I couldn't have been more shocked. I said, "Gary, no, absolutely not. I'm usually asleep at 3 in the morning. I'm a 9 to 5 kind of guy, you know that. I come here at 5:30 in the evening." He nodded slowly, still looking perplexed. He said, "That's what I figured, but the system says otherwise." He then turned to his computer where he had a spreadsheet open. He pointed at a line item. "See here." He showed me my name, my member number, and then a whole string of dates, all from the past 7 days, each with an entry timestamp of exactly 3 o'clock in the morning. And then, below those, were my usual 5:30 p.m. EM entries. I leaned in closer, reading the screen. It was my name, my exact member number. There was no denying it, but it wasn't me. I would never be at the gym at 3 in the morning. I hated late nights, always had. My internal clock was firmly set, and 3 a.m. was prime sleeping time. I remembered waking up every morning that week in my own bed, having slept soundly. I said, "Gary, I promise you I haven't been here at 3 in the morning. I don't know what to tell you. This is really weird." He rubbed his chin. He said, "Yeah, it is weird. That's why I brought you in. It's not just the system, Alex. We have security footage." My stomach did another flip. Security footage? Now I was really uncomfortable. I said, "Okay, so let's look at it then. If it's not me, it's not me." He nodded and pulled up a different screen. It was a grid of 4 security camera feeds. He clicked on one of the smaller frames and enlarged it. It was the entrance to the gym. The timestamp in the corner read 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 days prior. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. The door opened and someone walked in. My breath caught in my throat. The person was wearing clothes that looked exactly like mine. A dark blue hoodie, the one I usually wore to the gym, and a pair of dark gray sweatpants, also like the ones I owned. They were about my height, my build. They walked with a slight slouch, just like I sometimes did. My mind was racing. This was insane. I pointed at the screen. I said, "Gary, that's not me. I mean, it looks like me, but it's not me." He fast-forwarded a bit to another night. Same thing. 3 a.m. the door opens, and the person in my clothes walks in. This time, as they passed one of the side cameras, their head was slightly turned away. But still, the shape, the clothes, it was uncanny. Then Gary said something that really threw me. He said, "And here's the kicker, Alex. When they swipe in, they're using your key fob. The system confirms it as your fob entry every single time." He rewound the footage a few seconds. The person was standing by the scanner, their hand outstretched, and I could clearly see the distinctive blue key fob being held up to the sensor. A small blue rectangle identical to mine. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I said, "But that's impossible. My key fob never leaves my keychain." "It's been on my keychain the whole time. It was with me when I slept. It was with me when I drove to work. It's with me right now." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my keys, holding up the blue fob. "See?" Gary squinted at it, then at the screen. He looked genuinely baffled. He said, "I believe you, Alex. I've seen your fob before, but the system doesn't lie, and neither does this footage." He gestured to the screen. "Every single one of these entries for the past week at 3 a.m. has been registered by your key fob, and the person is always in your clothes." We watched more of the footage. The person would walk in, go straight to the treadmill section, and get on the furthest one, usually the one in the corner, where the camera angle was the worst. They'd turn their back to the camera, or angle their head down, as if deliberately trying to obscure their face. They'd just run, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for closer to 90 minutes. Then they'd walk out, again keeping their face mostly obscured. It was unsettling. The movements, the posture, it was all so familiar, yet utterly foreign. I tried to rationalize it. Could someone have stolen my fob, made a copy, then returned it? But that seemed like something out of a spy movie, not real life in a small town gym. And why would they do that just to work out in the middle of the night, while deliberately avoiding eye contact with cameras? It made no sense. I said, "Gary, I honestly don't know what to tell you. I haven't been here. My fob hasn't left my possession. I really think there's some kind of mistake." "System glitch?" He shook his head. He said, "I've checked the system logs repeatedly. Everything is tracking perfectly. No glitches. Every other member's entries are normal. It's just yours, these 3 a.m. AB entries that are completely out of the ordinary, and frankly, a little creepy." Creepy was an understatement. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Who was this person, and why were they using my identity to secretly work out? Were they trying to frame me for something? Were they trying to get me kicked out of the gym? For what purpose? I asked. Has anything been stolen? Has there been any vandalism during those times? Gary thought for a moment. He said, "No, not that I can tell. Nothing reported missing, no damage. Just this person coming in, working out, and leaving, and always using your fob and wearing your clothes." The clothes part was really getting to me. I had a few gym outfits, but the dark blue hoodie and gray sweats were my go-to. They were comfortable and familiar. Did this person know me? Were they watching me? Or my clothes were kept? It was a deeply unsettling thought. I suggested we look at the footage again, more closely. We rewound to one of the entries. As the person walked past the front desk, they held their hand up to the scanner. Gary zoomed in on their hand. I could clearly see the blue fob. It was identical to mine. But then, as the person lowered their hand, something else caught my eye. On their wrist, just visible beneath the sleeve of the dark blue hoodie, was a small round mark, a faded scar maybe, or a specific kind of watch. I couldn't quite make it out. Then I realized something. It was on their right wrist, my right wrist. I have a small mole, barely noticeable, just above my wrist bone on the outside of my right arm. It's been there my whole life. I always thought it was a small freckle actually. I looked down at my own right wrist. It wasn't a mole. It was a faded vaccination scar, a small circular indentation from when I was a kid. It was on the exact spot where I saw the mark on the footage. I swallowed hard. I said, "Gary, can you zoom in on the right wrist?" He did, as best as the grainy footage would allow, and there it was, the small, faint indentation. From the angle, it was hard to tell if it was my vaccination scar, but it was certainly in the right place. My mind went to a very dark place. Was I sleepwalking? Was I somehow, without any memory, going to the gym at 3 in the morning and working out? It was a ridiculous idea. I was a heavy sleeper. I lived on the 3rd floor of my apartment building. I'd have to get dressed, go down 3 flights of stairs, unlock my car, drive to the gym, then drive back, undress, and go back to sleep. And I'd have absolutely no memory of any of it? It sounded completely insane, and honestly, a little insulting. Why would my subconscious want to work out at 3 in the morning? I mentioned the sleepwalking possibility to Gary, mostly because I couldn't think of any other remotely plausible explanation. He just looked at me. He said, "Alex, have you ever sleepwalked before?" I said no, not that I know of. My parents never mentioned it. I've lived alone for years and I've never woken up somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. He just shrugged. He said, "Well, you do kind of look like yourself in the footage. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was you, just trying to hide your face, trying to hide my face." That was the really unsettling part. Not just keeping it turned, but actively angling it away from every single camera. It was deliberate. If it was me sleepwalking, why would I be so careful to avoid being seen? It made no sense. Gary said anyway, "I needed to bring this to your attention. It's starting to look a little suspicious, for security reasons. I mean, someone is accessing the gym with your fob during off-peak hours, and we don't know who it is. Even if it's you, we need to know what's going on." I understood his point. From his perspective, it was a security risk. But from my perspective, it was a genuine nightmare. Someone was using my identity, my property, to sneak into the gym, and I had no idea why or how. I told Gary I would try to figure it out. He said he'd keep an eye on it, and that if it continued, he might have to suspend my membership until it was resolved. That gave me a deadline and a sense of urgency. I left the gym that night feeling utterly disoriented. My entire evening workout was spent in a daze, trying to piece together this impossible puzzle. My mind kept replaying the footage, the figure in my clothes, using my fob, carefully avoiding the cameras, and that unsettling mark on the wrist. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, checking the time, checking to make sure my keys were still on my bedside table. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against my window made me jump. I was convinced that if I just stayed awake, I'd catch myself or whatever it was in the act. But nothing happened. The apartment was still and silent. The next morning, I was exhausted. I went to work, still completely fixated on the gym situation. I tried talking about it with a coworker during lunch, framing it as a hypothetical, asking what they'd do if something like that happened. They just laughed and said I was watching too many true crime documentaries. They suggested that Gary was probably just messing with me, but I knew Gary wasn't that kind of guy. And the footage was real. I decided I needed to get to the bottom of it. I thought about setting up a camera in my apartment, but that felt a little extreme, and honestly, I didn't even own a proper camera. I considered staying up all night, but I knew I'd just fall asleep. I needed a simpler solution. I went to a hardware store and bought a roll of very fine fishing line and some clear tape. That night, before bed, I carefully taped one end of the fishing line to the window latch of my bedroom window and the other end to the bedroom door. Then I ran another strand from the apartment door handle to a small glass on my kitchen counter. If anyone or anything opened either door or window, the line would break and the glass would fall, making a noise. It was crude, but it was the best I could come up with, and I put my keys with the fob under my pillow. No way I would miss them if they moved. Again, I barely slept. I kept listening, straining for any sound of movement. But the night was silent, save for the usual city hum. The glass never fell. The fishing lines were undisturbed. When my alarm went off, I checked everything. All was exactly as I had left it. My keys were still under my pillow. Confused and frustrated, I went to work. That evening, I went to the gym as usual, still feeling a sense of dread. Gary met me at the front desk. He looked at me with a weary expression. He said, "Alex, it happened again. 3 a.m. on the dot." My heart sank. I just stared at him. The fishing line, the keys under my pillow, it didn't make any sense. I hadn't moved. Nothing in my apartment had moved. He showed me the footage. Same exact thing. Person in my clothes, using my fob, carefully avoiding the cameras, doing their workout. It was chilling. I felt like I was losing my mind. I said, "Gary, I literally put safeguards in my apartment. My keys never left my pillow. There's no way I left my apartment. No way this was me." He just leaned back, rubbing his temples. He said, "I don't know what to tell you, Alex. All I know is that someone is regularly accessing the gym using your membership. And if I don't get some answers pretty soon, I'm going to have to deactivate your fob. I really don't want to do that, but I can't have this going on." The prospect of losing my gym membership, even a boring one, was upsetting. But more than that, the utter mystery of it was eating at me. I couldn't just let it go. I decided I had to do something more direct. I decided I would go to the gym at 3 in the morning myself, not to work out, but to wait, to see what would happen. If it was me sleepwalking, I figured, maybe I would finally snap out of it. If it was someone else, I would catch them. That night, I set my alarm for 2:45 a.m. I tried to nap in the evening, but I was too wound up. At 2:45, the alarm jolted me awake. I got up, feeling groggy and disoriented. I got dressed in a different set of gym clothes, making sure not to wear the dark blue hoodie or gray sweats. I put my keys with the fob in my pocket. I grabbed my phone and a small, bright LED flashlight that I used for camping. The drive to the gym was eerie. The roads were completely empty. Streetlights cast long, strange shadows. The air was cold and still. The small town felt much larger and more desolate in the dead of night. I pulled into the gym parking lot at exactly 2:55 a.m. There was only one other car there, a beat-up older model sedan, parked at the very far end of the lot, almost obscured by the shadows of a large oak tree. I didn't recognize it. It hadn't been there when I usually came. I parked a few spaces away from the entrance, killed my headlights, and just watched. The gym itself was dark, except for the faint glow of the vending machines visible through the windows. The only sounds were the distant hum of the refrigerators from the convenience store down the street, and my own breathing. I waited. 3 o'clock came and went. Nothing. The door remained closed. The lot remained empty, save for the 2 cars. I felt a surge of relief, mixed with a healthy dose of confusion. Maybe it had stopped. Maybe whatever was happening had just ended. Or maybe Gary had deactivated my fob after all, even though he said he wouldn't without telling me. I decided to give it another 15 minutes, just in case. The silence was thick and heavy. I started to wonder if I had been foolish, if I should have just let Gary deal with it. Then, at about 3:15, the passenger door of the old sedan at the far end of the lot opened. A figure emerged. My heart began to pound. It was wearing the dark blue hoodie and the dark gray sweatpants. My clothes. The figure closed the car door quietly and began to walk, slowly, deliberately, towards the gym entrance. They walked with that slight slouch I knew so well. My stomach churned. This was happening. As they got closer, I could see them more clearly in the dim light. By about my height, my build, they had their head angled downward, looking at the ground, just like in the video. Their right hand was tucked into the pocket of the sweatshirt. They reached the door, pulled their hand out of the pocket, and I saw a flash of blue. The fob, my fob. They held it up to the scanner. The faint red light of the scanner briefly illuminated their partially obscured face. It beeped green. The door clicked open, and they walked in. I sat there, frozen, for a good 10 seconds. My mind was screaming at me to do something, to run after them, to confront them, to demand answers, but a deeper, colder part of me was just terrified. This wasn't a sleepwalker. This was a real person, and they were actively trying to hide their identity, and they were using my stuff, my exact clothes, my exact fob, and that car. Whose car was that? I slowly, carefully opened my car door. I reached into my pocket, my hand trembling slightly, and pulled out my own blue key fob. If they were using my fob and my fob was in my hand, then how could they be using it? Was there another one, a clone? But Gary said the system was tracking my specific fob, not a copy, mine. I got out of my car, moving as silently as I could. The cold air hit me. I could feel my breath fogging in front of me. I walked around to the passenger side of my car, staying low, trying to get a better look at the other sedan. As I got closer to the corner of the building, I could see into the driver's seat of the other car. It was empty. The door was still ajar. My mind immediately connected it. The person had gotten out of the passenger side, leaving the car door open. Why? Who was driving it then? Or was it just dropped off? Then, a thought, cold and unsettling, popped into my head. If the driver's seat was empty and the passenger got out, who was watching from inside the car? Or was there no one? Was the car just left there? I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I moved carefully towards the gym entrance, staying close to the wall, trying to stay out of sight of any possible cameras inside, even though I knew they were mostly aimed at the workout floor. I reached the door. It was slightly ajar, just as in the footage. I peered inside. The lights were mostly off, but the emergency lights and some of the vending machine glows cast a dim, greenish light across the gym floor. I could see the treadmills in the distance. The figure was already on the furthest one, just like in the video, their back to me, the rhythmic thud of their feet on the belt echoing slightly in the empty space. I considered my options. I could call the police, but what would I even say? Someone is using my gym fob and clothes. They'd probably think I was crazy. I could confront the person, but they were bigger than me, and they were engaged in this elaborate deceptive scheme. Who knew what they were capable of? Then I remembered something Gary said. The system tracks the specific fob, not a copy. So if my fob was in my hand, and the person had used my fob to get in, how was that possible? It was a paradox. My eyes fell to the floor, just inside the entrance. There was a small, almost imperceptible gleam. I ducked inside quickly and snatched it up. It was a blue key fob, identical to mine. I had two now. My heart hammered in my chest, so they did have a copy. But how? And how did they know to make it exactly like mine? And why didn't Gary's system register it as a copy? It registered it as my fob, the one. I looked down at the fob in my hand. It was definitely a copy. A perfect, exact replica. That meant someone had somehow gotten hold of my fob, even for a brief moment, and cloned it, or stolen it and replaced it with a perfect fake that I hadn't noticed. But when, and why? The sound of the treadmill continued, a steady, mechanical thudding in the silent gym. I looked at the figure in the distance, their back turned, running, just like in the dozens of hours of footage I'd now reviewed in my head. I had a choice: confront them, risk whatever confrontation might occur, or just leave. The choice was easy. I was just someone trying to figure out a really weird situation. I quietly backed out of the gym, letting the door swing mostly shut. I got back into my car, still holding both fobs in my hand. I started the engine, kept my headlights off, and slowly, carefully drove away from the gym, leaving the strange figure to their midnight workout. I didn't even glance back at the other sedan. I just wanted to be gone. I drove straight home, the two fobs clutched in my hand. When I got back to my apartment, the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in pale oranges and pinks. I felt completely drained, both mentally and physically. I called Gary first thing in the morning, right before 9. He sounded tired. I told him what I'd seen. I told him about the second fob. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Alex, I don't know what to tell you. Our system can't recognize a clone fob as different from the original that easily. It just registers the unique ID. If someone copied your fob's ID, it would just show up as your fob." And he'd have to suspend my membership. He couldn't have someone cloning fobs and potentially letting other people into the gym no matter how weird the circumstances. I understood. It was a security liability, and honestly, I didn't even want to go back to that gym anymore. I never went back to that gym. I never returned the key fobs. They're still in a drawer somewhere in my apartment, a constant reminder of that strange, unsettling week. I still don't know who that person was, or how they got my fob, or why they were so determined to keep their face hidden, only to work out in my clothes in the middle of the night. I moved away from that town a few years later, got a new job, a new gym, but every now and then, late at night, I still think about that figure on the treadmill, their back to the camera, running in my clothes, and the lingering question of what I really saw.